256.0106 from 1 right, cleared for takeoff.
1 right, clear to go, yeah, 256.
Cleared 4461, 1 right, left and white.
Hey everyone, welcome to FlightCast, a podcast dedicated to the mobile flight simulator Infinite Flight, which you can use on your phone or tablet. Go ahead and download that from the App Store or Google Play if you haven't done that yet. It's definitely a must for the aviation enthusiast on the go. Joining me in the FlightCast virtual studio today is Mr. Skyhawk Heavy, Mark Denton. Hey buddy.
Hey man, what's going on?
Also here is FlightCast regular Joe Reilly. You're welcome, Joe.
What's up? Thank you.
And in a fun twist, our guest Jared Dichter is going to chat with us right out of the gate. Hey Jared, welcome back.
Good afternoon, guys. How you doing?
Good. Jared's joining us for part 2 on the CRJ. In episode 32, we chatted and just didn't have enough time to really get into some of the details of the airplane, so we're going to try and do that today. As we've learned, Jared is a regional carrier first officer from Madison, Wisconsin, who currently pilots the Bombardier CRJ 200, 700, and 900 series aircraft. He's also a member of the Infinite Flight Air Traffic Controller team. And this is fun. Jared and Mark, you guys are actually sitting in the same room for this recording.
Yes, we are. We're sitting here at his hotel room so we could record this episode.
Awesome.
So you're saying things are getting pretty serious.
Very much so.
And this is why, Joe, we invite you to the episodes afterwards.
Yeah.
Oh, the after hours?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Joe, didn't
You
you
all
know?
have actually already recorded this, haven't you?
Yeah, it's done. It's in the can. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
So, Jared, what are you doing down there in Mobile, Alabama?
Well, this is the glorious location for my second overnight of a 4-day trip.
Nice. Where else are you going?
Last
say
night I enjoyed our beachfront hotel in Fort Walton Beach, and tomorrow night I end up in Canton, Akron, Ohio, with the last day filled with 4 legs of flying in and out of New York's LaGuardia.
So basically, your scenery declines.
It does.
From VPS to Mobile.
It absolutely does. It absolutely goes completely downhill.
Now, come on. Akron, Ohio. That's going to be a blast.
Too bad you can't stop by Gary on your way.
Akron, Ohio seems to be our most populous overnight at this company because it is one of our maintenance bases. And we employ the entire top floor of the hotel in Akron.
Wow. So Akron's just a party at the hotel.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
So basically, the plane that you flew in today, you need to fly to Akron after everything.
No, someone just comes to wash off the blood and guts off the nose.
Jared, you had a
That's
little
what
fun
made it.
coming into Mobile today, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. At about 2,000 feet and 250 knots, a bird decided it wanted to come in and say hi. But it didn't make it through my 6-inch piece of glass.
Yeah.
I have a feeling there are parts of it scattered over northern Mobile out of Alabama.
What you could have done like Tyler and just hit go back 20 seconds and then redo it.
I'm sure Tyler will love that shout out.
So,
Oh, believe me, it's nothing he hadn't heard 100 times before.
it's true. So were you PIC at the time?
I was, as a matter of fact. It was my leg to fly because someone was supposed to be taking a video of the landing.
Actually,
Yeah.
Mark, you got a really great video of Jared coming into MOB today, didn't you?
I say this with all the love in my heart for you guys.
Mark shared a video.
That plane taxied 5 feet.
He's like, "Hey guys, I got this video today of Jared, and it's the CRJ taxiing straight into the gate." Like, wow, that is exciting. It's exciting.
I had
Mark.
to download that over cell service, and it took like 10 minutes. At the end, I'm like, what did I download this for?
Well, I promised y'all videos, so I wanted to at least provide a video because. And here's what was crazy is I was watching him on Flight Tracker, and it showed him coming in on 1.5. So I'm like, cool. Plus the METARs, was favoring 1.5. So I go to the 1.5 side of the field. Well, then next thing you know, flight radar is showing them on left downwind for 3.3. And I'm like, well, crap. So I have to drive all the way around the Coast Guard base, the National Air Guard, everything, and go over to the south side of the field. And he's at the gate.
That's because he had bird blood and guts all over his windshield, and he couldn't see what runway he was landing on.
I know.
Oh, no, I landed on 1.5 still. I was able to see.
Yeah, but flight radar was showing me 3.3.
Maybe they hit the transponder.
That video is the equivalent of a IFFG Photoshop.
Can that please go in the episode?
Oh yeah, this is all staying in.
Will.
Please.
You know what? Actually, here's what we'll do. We'll take the video. We're gonna throw a little FlightCast logo on it, and we're gonna put it on Instagram.
No, don't do that. You don't want your name associated with that video.
We'll put the Skyhawk Heavy logo on it.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll put the Skyhawk Heavy overlay on there. I should have. You know what? I should have videoed him doing his post-flight check, his little walk around in his little safety vest, kicking the tires, and tapping the flaps to make sure everything was still
on the
there.
200, the gear is too low, so I actually don't kick the tires.
Well, you were so far away, I couldn't really see.
Oh, that's good stuff. All right, guys, so we're going to get to some airplane talk here in a second. I just wanted to highlight a different kind of video that we uploaded to YouTube this week. If you go to youtube.com/FlightCastAudio, you will see a video called Flying the Murphy Rebel and Avoiding Disaster. And there's a little bit of, I'm trying to catch people's attention with that title, but obviously it has something to do with the video, and it really does. If you watch it, and about a little over halfway through, I was back to my municipal airport after flying around in the Rebel with my friend Cam, and I just was able to capture this crazy moment involving a helicopter on video. So I put together a little feature film. It's about 15 minutes long. So go over to FlightCast.audio and check that out. I think you guys will find it interesting, and maybe submit something in the comments if you have any light to shed on that. Any of you guys ever flown in a kit plane before?
Negative.
No.
Definitely not.
It's great because there's this little element of, I wonder if this is built properly while you're flying it.
Yeah, 172 is about the lightest aircraft that I'm going to fly in.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Joe.
What's up?
How's the little one?
Good.
He's talking about your newborn.
Oh.
All right, Mark.
Yep.
What came out of the Infinite Flight video tutorial production line this week?
Well, this week I put out a tutorial on how to use the trim, what the trim is on the aircraft. There's been a lot of requests for that one, so I just briefly covered that. Got a few more lined up. One that I want to do, and I'll probably do it next, is when to use the strobes in the landing lots.
Ooh, yes, please.
Because there is nothing that annoys me more than seeing an aircraft taxiing to the runway with their strobes on, or when I'm flying with you guys and we're at 30-something thousand feet and y'all got your landing lights on.
Guilty.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll have a long talk about lights and switches, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, and then I got a few more after that. So, of course, anytime anybody wants to request, a tutorial, they can always message me on the forum, and, and I'll add it to the list to get worked in.
Beauty. All right. Well, let's continue our chat about the CRJ. We talked a little bit about the differences between the 200, the 700, 900, Jared, and you mentioned to me the other day that you were flying the 200 and you had to remember to transfer the bleeds. And so why don't you explain what you meant by that? It got me researching bleed air, which was interesting. I didn't know. I knew that it was a thing, but I didn't know really enough about it. So now I do. But why don't you explain to us?
Well, bleed air.
Is this going to take long?
Classic.
I don't know. I'm gonna try and keep it concise. This is good practice for my captain upgrade oral, though. So
Yes, this is true.
bleed air is used for a couple things on the CRJs and other jet-powered airplanes. For us, it serves two purposes. One is our air conditioning and providing air for our passengers to breathe and keeps the airplane pressurized. The other is for our anti-ice. So the CRJ, we'll start with pressurization. Bleed air is taken off in the CRJ 200, is taken off two stages of the motor. I'm not 100% sure how many stages there are, and I should know, but I just have purged that from my memory. There are two stages. There's the 10th and the 14th. 10th stage air is what we use for our air conditioning and pressurization of the airplane. So what there's a little duct next to the 10th stage of the motor that sucks air out of the motor as it's passing through. And it transfers it to what we call our PACs, which is pressurization and air conditioning kit, I think. There's an acronym. There's acronyms for everything in aviation.
That sounds good.
We just call it the PACs. Transfers it to the PACs, one per each motor, which controls our airplane's pressurization. So when we're up at 30,000 feet, the cabin is usually pressurized down around 6. So even though we're up at 30,000 feet, for the people inside, it feels like they're only at 6,000 feet. And we have cabin pressure manifold acquisition module, cabin pressure acquisition module, and a couple other tools that are all automated that keep the cabin pressurized as we climb and descend. The other bleed air we have is 14th stage bleed air, which, and this is specific to the 200. It's a little different on the 7.9. Just reiterating that. On the 200, 14 stage air is used for anti-ice. So it will take anti-ice, or it will take hot air off the motor from the 14 stage, run it through a bunch of valves through the airplane out to the cowls of our motors, and then also to the leading edge of the wing. The CRJ, so prominently designed by Canadians, Jason, is so well designed that we actually do not need anti-ice on the tail end of the airplane. We don't need any on the leading edge of the rudder or the elevator at all. It's known as a symmetrical airfoil, so even though ice will build up on it, it will build straight out, which will not disrupt airflow from the tail. So when I told you I had to transfer the bleeds, Jason, what was happening was 200s on the ground, we didn't have any motors running, so the way we get our bleed air is off our auxiliary power unit, the APU.
Right.
And to do that, we have to manually select from our bleed air panel to close the bleed air valves from the motors, and open the bleed air valves that lead to the APU, which allows air to come off the APU and go through the PACs and keep the airplane cool when we're on the ground.
So is that why before you start the main engines, everything sort of sounds like it shuts down, all the air?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because when you start the main engine, that's the other thing. We take air off the APU to start spinning the motor. The motors, jet engines are so big, they need to be air started, essentially. And so we take air off the APU to start spinning the motor, and that goes through the process to start the engines.
Now, in the event that you have an in-op APU, which has happened, we have an air card on the ground.
Yep. That
we actually hook up to the aircraft, and that's all it does is blows air into the aircraft for them to have that air, the access to that air to be able to start
the motor,
start up the engine. So
yeah, okay.
So typically in the summer, especially in Charlotte or any city really where it gets really brutally hot, like the 700 and 900 have better packs, a bigger APU, and bigger motors that produce more power. We don't need to run the APU when we're taxiing out unless we're single engine taxiing. But they put out enough pressure that it keeps the airplane cool in the summer. And for the CRJ 200, it doesn't work that way. Especially if it's hot, we will leave the bleeds on the APU because the APU actually puts out more pressure through the air conditioning than the actual motors on the 200. And having the APU running through the takeoff will give us a little more power on the motors, because what you have to think about is when you're using bleed air off the engines for, say, air conditioning, pressurization, and especially if you have to have the anti-ice on, you're putting a lot more load on the motors, which it's all about motor preservation. And so in the summer, when we may need more power because it's hot or we're at high altitude airports, which we don't have many on the East Coast, but we will leave the air conditioning on the APU to keep the cabin cool and still get off the ground. And in the winter, it's the same way. If we have to take off with the anti-ice on because it's snowing outside and we're getting de-iced, and we need the extra power to be able to have takeoff power, get off the ground, get in the air, and still have the anti-ice on. Sometimes we have to leave the bleeds on the APU, or we just won't have enough available power to get off the ground.
Well, and you've said you feel like that aircraft's underpowered to begin with, right?
Yes, and it's old, so it has very, tired motors on it, the way we like to describe it.
And it's crazy because the 200, the cowlings actually look bigger than the engines on the 7 and the 9.
Yeah, it's...
But yet it's underpowered, whereas the 7 and the 9 have plenty of power.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. So, Jared, we've chatted a little bit about the fact that the 200 doesn't have leading edge slats, whereas the 7 and 9 do, and that affects your approach and other things. So let's get technical for a little bit. Not that bleed air discussion wasn't technical, but can you give us some average numbers for when you start your approach to landing, and how and when do you configure this aircraft for landing?
Yeah, we can definitely go into that. I'm actually in our POH now because
I can pull that up.
The way the book says to fly and the way it actually happens in real life typically is not necessarily
so the POH says not to hit birds, and you...
Yes, the POH says not to hit birds. But the POH also says that at glide slope intercept, we should be at gear down and flaps 30, when that doesn't really happen when you're in Charlotte, because they leave you at 6,000 feet. You intercept the glide slope 20 miles from the runway, and they tell you to maintain 170 knots to the final approach fix. So when you fly into big airports like the ones I fly into, most notably Charlotte, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, everything happens almost for you. Today, when we did Fort Walton Beach to Charlotte, we took off, we climbed out, we got onto the arrival. Like, our first fix after takeoff was the first fix on the arrival for Charlotte. Just to give you an idea, it's 400 miles from Fort Walton Beach to Charlotte. We were on the arrival for probably 250 of it, almost 300. So this whole time, which is time-based metering is what they call it, Atlanta Center loves it. You could probably ask Jared about it because they use it so much. We got at 29,000 feet, we got told to maintain our slowest practical speed. We maintained 240 knots. Next controller we came gave us 280 knots or less. So we sped up from 240 to 270. Next controller we got to gave us 250. Got on the arrival, or started descending up per the arrival, which the speeds on the arrival were 270. They gave us maintained published speeds at the first fix that had a published speed on it, which was 270 knots.
Sounds
Well,
like your
a Friday
flight
night
with me this morning.
It does. That's exactly what it was like. So when we fly in there, it's all very simple. The book says once we get on the downwind, we should slow to 180 knots. The CRJ 200 has a advisory directive, which is an FAA mandate, basically, that says we cannot extend the flaps until we're below 200 knots, even though the flap limit, once we extend them, once they're out beyond flaps 8, we can speed back up to 230 knots. The CRJs, the 7 and 9, we can go to flaps 1, which is just the slats. There's no rear flaps that come down at flaps 1. It's just 20 degrees of leading edge slats. We can do that at 230 knots. We can go to flaps 8, which it just drops the trailing edge flaps to 8 degrees. We can do that at 230 knots. Flap 20 is 220, and flaps 30 is the same in all 3 airplanes. That's 185, and flaps 45 is 170. So the book says when we coming into Mobile today, they left us on a left base. So about 10 miles from the airport, I started to slow from 250 to 180 knots. Once I was below 200, I configured to flaps 8. I was about 5 miles. Then on the left base, I configured, and we were going right to the final approach fix, which is what, a 4-mile final, 4.5?
Mm-hmm. 4.5, something like that. I'd have to pull it up.
So the final approach fix is 4.5 miles from the airport. So we were 5 miles from that, 4 miles out from the airport. So I was at 170 knots in flaps 20. About 5 minutes before I started to configure, I hit that bird, so things got real hectic real quick. At that point, I clicked the autopilot off because I like to fly. So I kind of dog-legged it in, so I cut inside the final approach fix. I configured to gear down in flaps 30, and that brings us, our profile on the 200 is 160 knots. Actually, our profiles are all the same. So when I call for gear down in flaps 30, I'm below 185 knots, slowing to 160. And I joined the localizer right on the glide slope on about a 4.5 mile final.
Yeah, it's 4.8.
Yeah, so I joined.
I
was on it just inside the final approach fix on the glide slope at about 1,500 feet AGL or MSL. Configured to flaps 45, called for the before landing checklist. Slowed to our ref speed, which we were actually at 46,000 pounds today. We were pretty heavy coming in, only about 1,000 pounds under our max landing weight. Slowed to my ref speed, which was 139, and brought that all the way down to the threshold. At 1,000 feet, my captain tells me I'm at 1,000 feet AGL. My response is stable. At 500 feet, his call is the airplane will actually call out 500 feet, so it'll go 500. He goes 500 feet on the bug, which is our speed bug. Because we actually, in infinite flight, you don't have a little bug that moves with whatever speed you have selected. In the airplane, we actually have a little blue kind of cutout on our speed tape that moves with whatever speed we have selected. Oh, so cool. I was on my speed, and he reads out our sink rate. And the reason he reads out our sink rate, so I was sinking 0.8, 800 feet per minute, which is just about what you're going to be at to be on the glide slope. And the reason he does that is because once you're below 1,000 feet AGL, that's why we have that 1,000-foot stable call. Inside 1,000 feet, you have to be stable or at least transitioning to stable by that point. If you're not, it's grounds for an immediate go-around. It's considered an unstable approach, and the right thing to do by any means is go around and try again.
And can you describe what you mean by stable?
Stable is vertical speed vertical speed is no more than 1,000 feet, no more than ref minus 0 plus 10. So our speed is nothing less than what it should be and nothing more, 10 knots more.
Okay.
And no more than, I want to say a dot. I think that's what our book says.
And
dot deflection on the glide slope.
Jared, when you're fighting like a heavy crosswind or something, can it be difficult to know if you're stable or not?
Yes and no. Regardless, your sink rate should be no more than 1,000 feet per minute. That's simple. Your airspeed will be all over the place. If it's, you're dealing with a crosswind or you're dealing with some gusty winds. If that's the case, we take our ref speed, and what we use for our gust factor is we take the gust factor and divide it by 2. So if its winds are 190 at 10, gusting 20, the gust factor there, the gap is it gusting from 10 to 20, it's 10. We divide that by 2, it's 5 knots. So we add 5 knots to our ref speed. So that's a stable approach. So at 500 feet, the captain reads that out. The airplane will then read out 100 feet when we're 100 feet AGL, and proper position for us there is just about to cross the threshold or right over the threshold. Now, the CRJ 200 and the 79 are very different in this sense. The 200, you're 2.5 degrees nose down all the way to the runway. The 79, you're about 0.5 degree nose up. In the 200, the airplane calls out 100, and then it waits for 50 feet and calls out 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. We talked about that the last episode. At 50 feet, you walk the power out in the 200, and you should be out by 30 and be at flight idle by 30 and starting to pitch back into your flare, and it lands very flat. The 79 lands with a much more prominent flare, and you leave the power in. The best landings come when your thrust levers hit the idle stop as your main gear touches down. And the reason that is important is all of our flight spoilers, or all of our ground spoilers, deploy. There's a a logic to when those deploy. The thrust levers have to be at idle. Both thrust levers have to be at idle. There has to be weight on wheels or wheel speed. So, and the reason they all deploy is to unload the wing, keep the airplane on the ground. That's their primary, that's why we call them ground lift dumping. So, like when we deploy our flight spoiler, we only have one flight spoiler that actually comes up. We have 4 boards, as we call them, but only one comes up when we deploy our flight spoiler. When we land, all 4 of those come up. When we turn in flight, only one comes up, and it's different. The 79 actually uses 2 ground lift dumping and two to assist us in turns and as flight spoilers. The 200 is different. The 200 is quirky. Well, the captain will call, when we land, the captain will call ground spoilers. I use the reversers, almost everyone does, so he'll call 2 in reverse, 90, 60. And it's not only the captain, it's those are my calls too when I'm the pilot not flying.
Right.
So
okay.
When he landed in Charlotte today, he did.
Is quirky,
I made those call outs.
Is quirky a word that you use in the maintenance log?
No.
So, Jared, you were discussing with Mark and I before we hit record something called FADEC. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, FADEC is a very nice and probably something that makes pilots very lazy tool that we have on the CRJ 7 and 9. I don't know why I keep calling it the CRJ 7 and 9. I think everyone knows that by now. I probably could just say 7-9 like I normally do.
I'll just ignore you.
FADEC is an acronym, as I think we have the most acronyms of any other profession. FADEC is fully automated digital engine control.
Full authority.
Full authority. See, that's why I have you here to fact check.
Yep, that's it.
Because I
We're
can't.
all in trouble.
When we fly the 200, which does not have FADEC, we have to manually adjust the throttle so that our N1s match. When they don't match, they make a funky sound that I can't describe it, and I don't want to do it again because I'll sound like a putz. But it makes a very different sound. If there are people that have flown props, it sounds like your propellers that are spinning against each other are out of sync. What else makes that noise that we can?
It's like when you try and hum with the vacuum cleaner and then adjust your pitch as you're humming.
Yeah,
I've never done that.
That's
ever.
a good bit. I've never done it either, but it sounds like it makes sense.
Try it. It'll change your world.
What can we do to where Joe can understand? It's kind of like the sound that a moonshine distillery makes, and you try to match that sound, Joe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know
There
that
we go.
one.
It's like a womp womp womp. There you
And
go.
it just doesn't match perfectly. It just doesn't match perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got that.
So what FADEC does, more simply, it manages our engine speeds. It manages our motors. It takes a lot of the human element out of having to focus on making sure that they're matched. And it does so much more than that. In the 7.9, our air conditioning, we can set a temperature and it will command the packs to put out air that gets us that temperature. In the 200, we have to manually set what the air, like, we just spin a knob to a certain air temperature and it'll spit out that temperature air. It works very well. So, the most important thing for me for FADEC is when I fly the 7.9 and we go take, I almost said my call sign, flight whatever, line up and wait. Runway 1, that's right. Runway 18, center line up and wait. And we take the runway and the captain gives me the controls. And we go to take off. I just push the thrust levers up in the 7.9 and it goes click, click. Kind of like the Airbus, Jason. You saw this in the Airbus.
Right.
And it advances the throttle or the engines to whatever the set determined N1 speed is based on usually temperature, unless we're doing a flex takeoff in which it's the temperature we tell it, and it will put out the right speed that it should be. In the 200, we just type into the FMS what the temperature is. It says, okay, your takeoff power setting is this. And when we go to take off, we advance the thrust levers, and then we manually have to get it, and it's never exact. It's usually 0.2 or 3% more than what it should be.
Why would you tell it a different temperature?
We tell it a different temperature to command less power out of the engine. The name of the game in aviation is save your engines because they cost the most money. So the longer you can use them, the more money they can make me.
So is that like a longer runway you'd have to use less, or
longer runway? Almost always for us, we use usually we tell it the highest temperature we can, which is 48 degrees Celsius, which is really hot. So we do that. The CRJ 700 is the best for this. We take off out of Washington, D.C. with a full load of passengers, a full load of fuel. Well, not a full load of fuel, but 9,000 or 10,000 pounds. We usually weigh about 67,000 pounds. And we are always going to be at flaps 8 for takeoff. So we'll have the slats down to 20, the flaps at 8 degrees. And our flex temp is usually 48 degrees Celsius. And I advance the thrust levers, and DC's runway, and I will give you an exact number. It's like 7,002 feet long. That's runway 119 in Washington, D.C. at Reagan National. And we will do that 7,170 feet. We will always get off the ground because the 700 is lighter than the 900 with the same engines and more wing than the 200, so its speeds are far lower than than what the 900 speeds are and far lower than what the 200 is. And we will always conserve the engines on the 700. And so I push the thrust levers up to the takeoff detent, we call it. We roll down the runway. We get the airplane in the air at 1,000 feet. We accelerate to 200 knots, bring the flaps up. And I call flaps up after takeoff checklist. And when I do that, I reach down to the thrust levers and I pull them back about a 1/4 inch. They'll slide up and kind of back into another detent, so they're kind of stuck there. And that's the climb detent. And so it will set our climb power, which usually when we take off with such reduced power, it's actually more power than what we took off with. And we climb on out, climb up. The most prominent flight I do is DC to Jacksonville, Florida for some reason. Climb up, go down the coast. Once we get to our cruise altitude, I pull them out of the climb detent, and it will give me the max cruise power, which is usually like 89% N1, and it pulls back to about 85, 84%, and I cruise down to Jacksonville, Florida, and get on the arrival there and start that whole arrival process over that we just talked about. So FADEC will give us a nice clean sound, so we won't have two awkward sounds coming from the motors, and it controls our fuel flow. FADEC is brilliant. It controls everything that our motor does.
So, Jared, you've talked a little bit about Charlotte Douglas, which is CLT, obviously in Charlotte, North Carolina. You fly in there quite a bit?
Home base, we'll call it.
Okay, home base. So you chatted with me the other day about banked scheduling, and actually Tyler got a tour of the tower there once, and he talked to me about this as well. So bank scheduling with departures and arrivals, and at the time you noted that when you shared this with me, you had been number 14 for departure while taxiing. So can you explain what bank scheduling is and how it affects you as a regional pilot?
Bank scheduling is the brain trust of Doug Parker and the American Airlines management team. It is their thought that if they bring all the passengers to the airport at the same time and then everyone leaves at the same time, they're going to get the most efficiency out of their airplanes, the most people seated on airplanes, because all the big airlines are worried about is making money.
Right.
So,
do you agree with that? That actually, bank scheduling actually accomplishes that?
I was a gate agent for a long time, for 4 years, and I will say I've seen more efficiency out of it. I've seen what I feel are larger passenger loads, and that it does give opportunities. I'm going to wash my hands clean of it. I honestly can't say, but sure. I've seen mixed reviews. From a pilot's perspective, it causes a lot of congestion. I've said it before, we've had 45, 50, over an hour taxi times to the gate. And that's on a good weather day because there's construction and a taxiway's closed and whatever.
Well, I can imagine too, if you're doing something like bank scheduling, so you've got all arrivals coming in pretty much at the same time and all the gates filling up at the same time, if one thing goes wrong, that could cause some major problems.
Yes, it does. It does. It causes a lot of congestion. You have these problems where you're sitting on the taxiway already for 20 minutes now, and the flight attendant calls, hey, someone got up to go to the bathroom. Well, now the airplane can't move. And so if someone's too close behind you, they're stuck. And if someone's too close behind them, they're stuck. And if you're, at a one way in, one way out, well, ground or ramp control is like, well, screw you guys, we'll get people out. And now there's 15 airplanes coming out. Oh, passengers seated again, we can move. Well, too bad you're stuck waiting for the 15 airplanes to come out so you can go in.
Right.
And just, it can cause problems, but it does work. I mean, I've seen it work. It's if they do one thing really well at Charlotte, it's move airplanes. You know, it's hard, and it's hard on them, and I see it, and I sit here and I bitch and moan about it because, you know, I'm affected, or my friends are affected by it, my coworkers are, but they move them quick. I mean,
that'd be intense in the tower for sure. Guys, let's just take a quick live flight break. We'll be right back. Mark, have you heard of live flight for infinite flight?
Yeah, man. I've used it to track flights and to see which regions and airports are busy before, planning my flight.
Right. Well, as you probably know, a new version of live flight is now available at liveflightapp.com. This new version is better than ever and has been rebuilt from the ground up. With a new design, more flight stats, a search feature, and airport information, tracking and planning your flight is easier than ever.
Oh, man, I know. And now with the new downloadable KML files, you can download your flight data to any Earth browser, such as Google Earth. It's so cool.
Absolutely. And if that wasn't enough, you can now subscribe to Live Flight Horizon, a new service for only $1.99 a month that provides real-time, worldwide airport information such as weather, runway data, and charts. It also allows you to search for flights, active ATC frequencies, and airports. And as a Live Flight Horizon subscriber, you'll also get much longer online sessions, and you'll be helping Cam to keep developing and improving this great app.
So guys, make sure you head over to liveflightapp.com to give it a try, and also subscribe to Live Flight Horizon. It will make your infinite flight experience so much better.
And now back to the podcast. You know what? We have some leftover forum questions from last time, so I thought maybe I'd ask a couple of them. Since this interview was
I've
sort
got
of
a forum question.
Ooh, go ahead, Joe.
I just want to know, because I've seen you fly a lot more lately. I guess, being on here has made you actually participate more. When you're flying in, and you made the comment to me, it's now been twice in a row when you've flown, you've had some snide remark about me telling you to slow down. What is your biggest complaint about how controllers, will handle approach and stuff like that, as opposed to how you actually fly, like when you're going into Charlotte? Like today, this morning in Hawaii, I think, was it yesterday in Chicago? So like this morning when you were flying in, I told you to slow to 200 and you were pretty far out. And, you said something about it. Is that, do people do that too much? Do you see speed controls used too much in infinite flight? Do you think they're not used enough? Would you rather see different vectors?
I don't think they're used enough in infinite flight. To be honest, I think, and this is for me, this is from what I've seen. When we checked on the Charlotte Tower today, we were 10 miles from the airport, number 4 for the runway. Spacing when you're landing in Charlotte is, if I look on my MFD and the airplane is inside our 2.5 mile ring, we're probably okay. If they're any closer than about 2 to 2.5 miles, we may have to go around. It's that tight, and it's literally, it's all speed driven. It's and it's so much more complex in real life.
Well, yeah, obviously.
And it'd be hard to recreate, but it's like you check on with Charlotte approach, so and so whatever, descending on this arrival with Victor or whatever. They're almost always going to give you a speed, and at the first speed, if you're below 10,000 feet, they know you're at 250 knots. So the first speed you're going to get is usually going to be 210 knots, because they want to keep everything tight. Everything is tight, 3 mile to 5 mile spacing. Keep it close, so get everyone in and get everyone out. That's what I was talking about last couple days ago when we were talking about wake turbulence and stuff.
Yeah, that was yesterday when we were talking about departures. If they're all going to the same airport, space them out a little bit. Don't just fling them out.
And that's why I brought up departure fixes. It's all spacing based on that. So I would love to see, I'm on a 3 mile final, to O'Hare, and the guy ahead of me is just now touching on the runway. I think that would be great. Do I know how it works? I don't know. I think we need some more tutorials from good old Skyhawk Heavy, but I think it can get there. I think, spacing can come down. I think we need to take advantage of those commands, those speeds, and keep it tight. I liked what you did. I liked that your first instinct was to descend me to 9,000 because if I'm at 10, I'll be doing whatever speed I'm doing, but if I'm at 9, I'll be doing 250 knots. That's brilliant. That's what they do. That's what they do in real life when they don't want to speed restrict you because, I don't know, they just say descend and maintain 9,000. And I sit there and look at my captain and I go, he only wants us to do that because we're going fast and he wants us at 250 knots.
Yeah.
And then I saw I was closing on the guy and you gave me, I think it was 240 before I even got there. So I ended up leveling off, slowing down, and continued my descent. And that's another thing. A lot of times they'll give you slow to 210 knots, then descend and maintain 6,000. That's a huge one we get.
Yeah. Cool.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I like that question.
Thanks for asking that, Joe. So Misha was actually wondering last time you were here, Jared, and to be honest, and I didn't ask it last time because we had so much to go over, and I wasn't sure if I should. But to be honest, I've wondered this too. Is it the case that pilots of the larger aircraft sometimes feel they have more prestige over pilots flying smaller aircraft like the CRJ family? So if that's offensive, I apologize, but
well,
answer it anyway.
doesn't everybody start there?
It's not offensive. It's not, and I don't want to. That's a really good question, and it's a really tough question for me to answer because I know some of the stories about people that I don't want to bring into this.
Sure. So in general, would you say yes, there is some of that?
Some do, some don't. There's some people that fly RJs that feel they have more prestige over other people who fly RJs.
Oh.
And I'm not going to go into that.
Well, that's
I'm
life,
not going to
right?
go into that subject either.
That's life.
In terms of flying skills, I'm not going to bag on anyone's flying skills. If you're good enough to get a job at any airline, clearly you're able to fly an airplane.
Hey, it's all a big game you got to play. Some play the easy way, some take the long way, but
it's not the name of the game. The name of the game is how do you act when it's something that doesn't normally happens.
Are you ready for it? Are you prepared?
Are you going to sit there and freak out, or are you going to calmly be able to handle yourself? And I think that actually brings us right into the next question I saw on this sheet.
Yeah, go for it.
I
won't even ask it. You can just set it up.
Can the CRJ fly and get to the ground if one engine is cut off? I will tell you what, I've seen that airplane do a lot of things, and it absolutely can do that.
Can it do it with both?
It can get to the ground with both engines.
Yeah.
You can always get to the ground.
Most things in the sky will get to the ground, Mark.
But could you land it on the Hudson?
I wouldn't want to try. No. I hope I never have.
No,
I hope I never have to answer that question.
No.
But yes, it can. Here's a neat thing with the FADEC. Every 6 months we go to the sim. I actually go back for mine a month from today. And we do. Eventually, we're going to have a new training program style where it's literally you go and you do everything repetitively until you prove that you can proficiently do it. So we practice what are called V1 cuts. So you're sitting on the runway, you advance the thrust levers. If I'm the pilot flying, I look at the captain, or I don't look at him. I just say set thrust. He puts his hand on the throttles. So as we're rolling down the runway, he says 80 knots. I say checks. He goes V1. My second hand comes up onto the control wheel. He says rotate. I pull back. Now, right at V1, the simulator is programmed to experience an engine failure. So I rotate, and the airplane wants to yaw because we only have one thrust coming from one engine. So we have to counteract that.
With what, rudder?
With rudder, yes.
Okay.
Lots of rudder.
Lots of rudder, especially in the CRJ. And we start climbing out. And it's a normal takeoff. Nothing changes. You just have more rudder in. It's all about maintaining the center line. So I rotate, and everything happens really slow. That's probably, I think, what freaks people out the most is how slow it happens.
Just keeping the aircraft coordinated is
It
the
is.
important
Well,
part.
it is, yeah. But it's all about staying calm.
That's it.
So the engine fails. I go, okay, he already said V1, which is our decision speed. So I'm going flying no matter what. So he says V1, engine failure, rotate. I start to pull back and the airplane comes off the ground. Nothing changes. Takeoff power is set. The CRJ has what we call APR, automatic performance reserve. So when it senses an engine failure, it boosts the operating engine by 2%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough. So we rotate at the proper altitudes. He calls positive rate. I call gear up, speed mode. The next call out will be at 400 feet AGL. I'll call heading mode because we're not going to turn at this point, or we're going to fly whatever the proper engine out procedure is, which typically is runway heading.
Have you told ATC yet that this is happening?
Usually in the process, someone has a chance to get a word in. It's usually whatever. We've had an engine failure, maintaining runway heading.
Okay. But you're flying. Your first mission is to fly the airplane, right? So if you don't have time to talk, you don't talk.
Yeah. First thing first is you fly the airplane. There are a couple airports where we're not going to stay on runway heading, taking off runway 1 in DC and maybe in some terrain areas. But most of the time it's runway heading. So I call heading mode and half bank because we don't want to overbank the airplane on one engine. And then actually, believe it or not, I will reach down and trim the airplane and then have the autopilot on because it's easier to work and diagnose the problem and try and get the engine restarted or come up with a plan to
with the AP running.
It's easier to do it when the autopilot's flying.
Okay.
So we do that. We accelerate eventually. We clean the airplane up, so bring the flaps up, run the QRH. So even if it's a fire, there's no rushing here. You need to handle the problem and fly the airplane, because if something happens to the airplane, whatever happens next doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
The engines are designed to fall off, and the airplane will still fly with the flaming dead engine falling off the airplane. The airplane will still fly.
Okay. So I wasn't going to ask this, but if you can give me a really quick answer, we're short on time. Emil asked, do you like it when people come by and visit the cockpit, which obviously has to happen before or after the flight these days, post 9/11. So what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice. It's always fun when little kids come up, and I let them turn on the seatbelt sign, usually if it's before we push off the gate. It's nice to get a thank you, especially if we're dealing with weather or something. It's always...
Thank you for not killing us.
Yeah.
Oh, I always love to give a thank you if the pilots are standing there, for sure.
Yeah, I do what I can to stand in the doorway and thank people for coming along and choosing us. It's always nice.
Guys, should we add anything else before we go?
No, man, I think we've gotten a lot covered.
Lots of good stuff in there.
Jared,
Did I answer all the technical questions?
Yeah, man. And last episode, you were self-conscious about having babbled too much. Man, this isn't babbling at all. It's exactly what we asked you to come here and do, and talk about what you love and what a lot of us love and we don't know enough about. So thank you for coming along and educating us a little bit.
Hey, man, it's all worth it to me. You guys are good people, and I like good people. So
there you go.
We'll send y'all pictures of the drinks later.
Okay. Yeah. Jared, you look after our Mark, okay?
Yeah, I'll take care of him.
All right, Jared, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason, very much, and Mark, and kind of Joe.
Thanks, guys. That was Real World Pilot on the CRJ, Jared Dichter, and he joined us this time from Mobile, Alabama with Mark on Skype. Thanks as always for listening. If you haven't already, head over to the App Store or Google Play and download Infinite Flight. For more of the podcast, visit our website, flightcast.audio, and be sure to subscribe on iTunes or YouTube. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/FlightCastAudio, on Twitter at FlightCastAudio, and on Instagram at FlightCast. FlightCast is brought to you by Linkhouse Media on the web at linkhousemedia.com. We can always use your help to keep the podcast rolling, and a few ways to do that are by clicking the donate button at the bottom of our website or by heading to flightcast.audio/shop to buy your t-shirt, hat, mug, or iPhone case. To cover the fine print, FlightCast is not affiliated with Infinite Flight or Flying Development Studio. I'm Jason Rosewell. Thanks for listening, and happy landings. Joining me in the FlightCast virtual studio today is Mr. Mark Skyhawk Heavy. What? Nope. Joining me in the...
I just told Jared, I put it on mute, and I said, he's fixing to screw it up.
It's part of my thing, you know? It's my shtick. Listen, I love you guys, but I'm not doing this for the good of my health, so let's get this thing going.
All right.
I'm waiting on y'all.
We're not doing it for a paycheck yet either.
Definitely not that. Here we go.
See, that's why I have you here to fact check.
Yep, that's it.
Because I
We're all
can't.
in trouble.
If only Donald Trump
I
had
can't-
the same type of person on his team.
Oh, let's not go political, Jason.
He's too busy out there grabbing people, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Mark does have to get up and drive in the morning.
Oh, this is honestly, I have so much editing to do on this one. It's going to be fun.
Hey, but this has been fun though.
It
This
has been very
Here's-
fun, yes.
Jared, I hate to eat and run, but I've got to go.
Jason, is this what you do for a living?
No,
Like,
no.
You're
I'm
really good at it.
I'm a web developer, so I sit at my desk anyway, so I just add this to it. Add this to my workload.
Are you video recording me?
I just took a picture so I can send it to them so they can see how professional you are right now with your feet up on the wall.
Oh, you should see how I am when I'm at cruise altitude and the autopilot's on.
Maybe that's why you didn't see the bird.
That's when
So
you're in your
nobody
boxers,
else
right?
nobody else
Huh?
has their pants off.
He's got such this deep voice, you know, for somebody who's about 4 foot tall can play racquetball in a shoebox.
Good grief.
I didn't know Oompa Loompas could go down to that octave.
When he got off the plane in Atlanta, I was like, I cannot believe they let an unaccompanied minor fly internationally like that by himself.
Oh my
Did you-
god.
Did you have to pay to sit in the overhead bin? I would have asked for a discount.
This is garbage.
I just spit water through my nose.
He came out, he had the little unaccompanied minor sticker and the little plastic wing stuck on his shirt.
Did he come out first?
I'm burning this hard drive when we're done.